Hello audioholics, this is Logan, and welcome back to Getting Into Trip Hop. Today I will be trying to get into possibly one of the most high-profile acts I will ever be covering on this show. I am of course talking about Björk. Now, Björk has been a hit machine, at least in her home country of Iceland, ever since the 1980s with the Sugar Cubes, and alongside that came some kind of underground UK and US success as well. Her real success, however, came after she broke apart from the Sugar Cubes and went out on her own, releasing her debut and post albums, titled Debut and Post, in the early 90s, and those will be the albums that I will be covering today. Upon doing research of Björk, I came to find out that she is totally legit. I mean, I kind of knew that, but not to the degree that I would come to find out. She is, I guess to some degree, kind of a child prodigy, and started in the music business in the late 1970s doing some post-punk music. Again, later earning more success with the Sugar Cubes and even more success on her own. So that is very interesting, but I didn't actually know too much about Björk. I definitely didn't really listen to her music, and all I really knew about her was...
Are you Icelandic or retarded?
wearing flowery dresses, and that's about it. So this will be a very interesting learning experience for me, and hopefully for at least some of you.
Sometimes, when I am putting oranges in a circle, I think of my thoughts and they make me laugh.
So in case you are unaware, this is part 3 of a 20-part series where I try to get into various trip-hop bands and artists in an attempt to gain a better appreciation for the genre. If you are interested in this, I highly recommend subscribing because I post a new video every Sunday in this series. I've already gotten into trip-hop legends, Tricky, and Bonobo, and plan on doing many more in the future. 17, in fact. If you're interested in prog music, Tyler has a similar series where he tries to get into prog rock, prog metal, all various different aspects. So, slightly different formats, but overall very similar in execution. We also have The Wrong Opinion, where we do tier lists of best to worst albums by a particular artist, and our weekly podcast, Audioholics Unite, where we do live reactions of a particular album and encourage the audience to listen along in a link in the description. And also, we just go off on random tangents and BS. So, if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out the channel, subscribe if you like the content, don't if you don't. I don't care, I'm not getting paid for this. So, without further ado, let's get on to the first album, Debut. Alexa, play Debut by Björk.
Playing Debut by Björk from Spotify.
So we are on the first track, Human Behavior, and I can immediately tell why this was a hit and why this would have never been a hit at any other time other than 1993 or 1994. This was right around the time of, like, the Cranberries, and right around the time the trip hop had any kind of mainstream chart success, albeit very limited in the United States. Mostly it was like Massive Attack, Portishead, and a lot of it kind of had like underground success here, but most of the success was in the UK. That being said, it is a very good song. I immediately noticed that Björk's voice is absolutely amazing. It is very unique, definitely kind of avant-garde sounding, as I expected, but not totally inaccessible. So we are on Crying now, and another reason why Björk was big, and I think it's really evident on songs like this, is this was also around the time that techno became huge, especially things like Eurodance. And this was sort of that fused with, like, again, elements of avant-garde, but mostly kind of, just trip hop and regular pop. This is actually more close to trip hop than I was expecting. I was kind of expecting like maybe smaller elements of trip hop, but you know, I figured I'd just kind of cover it anyway, because, like, you know, I always just wanted to get into Björk, and Björk is a popular artist, so I figured most people would know who they are. But no, this is like 100% trip hop, so I don't really need to worry about that. But regardless, I'm not huge into like Eurodance or techno or anything, but for what it does its job very effectively. It is something that I would love to dance to, you know, if I could dance. Alright, we are on track number 3, Venus as a Boy, and this is the most experimental and unique song so far, and also so far my favorite. Very unique instruments, like you got bells, I think pots and pans, like violin. It's all really nice. So we are on track number 4 now. There is more to life than this. Warped techno is what I would describe this album as so far. And honestly, tracks like this are more in line with kind of what I expected out of Björk from the very, very, very little experience I have had with her. But it is still very good. I would say, if nothing else, this is an album that even if you don't like, you at least need to experience. So we are on, like, Someone in Love now, and this came totally out of left field. It sounds nothing like the rest of the album, at least up to this point, and it's just like this little acoustic thing, honestly. It's really beautiful, but man, is that random. I assume we'll be seeing more songs like this as the album goes on, and I don't hate it. It's just interesting to hear it. Alright, we are on Big Time Sensuality. Another techno song. Really good, just not much to say about it. The only thing I will say is that some parts of this album do give me sort of a vibe of like when Madonna started incorporating techno influences into her music. I don't know if she was doing that right around this time yet, but she would eventually, and it kind of, like, it's not like super, like, you know, cocaine techno, like Eurodance type thing, but it's sort of a little bit more muted, and that's how she was able to carve her own niche into, you know, the 90s and into the 2000s. But Björk does it as well, and it is very good. So we are on One Day now, and this is the song that sounds the most trip-hop so far. That being said, it's not... I'm not saying that it sounds, you know, ununique. It sounds like trip-hop, but with a unique spin that only somebody who has, like, this larger-than-life personality, such as Björk, could bring to the table. Alright, we are on Aeroplane, which I actually did not know this, but the Europeans apparently spell it aeroplane instead of airplane. But it's probably my least favorite song so far. not to any fault of it specifically, but just because I think the sound of this album is starting to blend into itself.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
Hopefully that changes, but yeah, so far this is my least favorite track. So now we are on the song Come to Me, and I have to say about the same thing as I did with Aeroplane. It's all starting to sound a bit samey. And I think the thing is, like, with Tricky especially in their first album, even if it did sound a little bit samey at times, the beats always saved it. Or at least they did for, like, most of the album. Björk, the beats I don't think can carry the entire album. And Björk tries her hardest, but I don't think that she necessarily does all the time either. I still enjoyed this album so far, but I would say it kind of dips around the halfway to three-quarter way point. And Come to Me is further testament to that. We are on Violently Happy now. I kind of like this song, and to be fair, the title of it definitely got my attention. The tone of it kind of reminds me of Possession by Sarah McLachlan. But, you know, sound-wise, again, I have to say that it all kind of bleeds together, but I guess, like, the actual song, I could see myself coming back to over some others on this album. So we are on the Archer song now. This is the final track off of the debut album. And I like tracks like this and like Someone in Love, not necessarily because they are the best tracks, but because since they do kind of come out of left field, it's almost like an attempt of breaking up the monotony of the album. Arguably how it works, I don't really know, but I think it's at least a valiant attempt and should be recognized as such. And this song is definitely really interesting with the horns and kind of the folk structure of it. So that is the end of debut. Overall, I think it's a good album with good vocals and interesting instrumentation that does kind of drag a bit. I mean, it's only 40 or so minutes, which is about average, but I think that it leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of allowing it to have some variety to keep the momentum going throughout that 40 minutes. So anyway, now on to Post. Alexa, play Post by Björk.
Playing Post by Björk from Spotify.
So we are on the first song, Army of Me. So far, this is already my favorite song I've heard by Björk. It's a kind of techno song, well, basically trip hop, of course, but really kind of dark sounding, and it has a really nice hook, a really nice beat, and amazing vocals by Björk. But amazing in a sort of unique way. Not in a way that maybe everyone would agree with. But overall, very good. I'm actually probably going to add this to what is essentially my Save for Later playlist on Spotify. So we are on the song Hyper Ballad now. This is the second track. And ballad is not the word that I would use. It is definitely kind of softer, but it still has a pretty fast kind of techno beat. Again, the thing that immediately comes to my mind is Madonna of, like, the late 90s and early 2000s when she kind of went techno. But all in all, this is a pretty good song. I really like it. It's pretty soothing, and Björk's voice, again, I've said this several times, is very good. Now we are on the modern things, and this is really trippy. I like it though. It has a really kind of interesting sound. Probably best enjoyed under the influence of something probably highly illegal even in Iceland, but I can assure you I am sober and I still like it. It is a really good thing that I do not own this album on vinyl. We are at It Is Oh So Quiet, and we have jumped from warped techno to now warped show tunes, apparently. This is interesting. I really am digging this album just because it is just throwing me through such a loop. I can say this is one of the most unique albums I have ever heard. Something I just noticed, so if you can see in the top left, I am recording this on Sunday, June 14th of 2020, and this album, according to Spotify at least, came out June 13th, 1995. So if I would have been recording this on Saturday, which I normally would, I would have been recording this video on this album's 25th anniversary. So, happy belated birthday. We are now on Enjoy, and this kind of sounds like garbage. And by that, okay, no, that's a terrible joke that everybody's made. By that, I mean, this sounds like the band Garbage. Specifically, their theme for The World Is Not Enough movie, which came out considerably later than this. But I still really like it. It sounds really dark. Again, I would call this like warped techno, or I don't know. I don't think it would fall too far out of place in like a post-grunge playlist, you know? We are now on You've Been Flirting Again, and this is more what I would call a ballad, an orchestral ballad, in fact. This is kind of interesting. It feels like it belongs in like a somber Disney movie from a parallel universe. This is... I don't even know how to describe this album anymore, but that is for all the right reasons. I am really loving just the journey that I am going through right now. This is not an album anymore, it's a journey. So we are on Isabelle, another orchestral sounding song. Not quite as batshit sounding as some of the songs I have heard so far, but definitely really interesting. This is one of the most quote-unquote standard trip-hop songs I've heard on this album. And air quotes again, because this is not tricky, this is not Portishead, this is a beast all its own, and has to be treated as such. Here we are now on Possibly Maybe. This is a really minimalist sounding song, but again, kind of really eerie, really warped sound to it. Just really interesting. Started up with like what sounded like a dial-up modem. Now, something I've realized, with all of the positive I've said about this album, the one thing it kind of lacks is like the really weird instruments of debut, like the bells and things like that. Now, if we had an album with the weird instruments and the batshit insanity of this album, that would be perfect. Of course, then you'd basically have a Gentle Giant album, but, you know. We are on I Miss You, and this is not as good, but it might not even be down to the song itself, but more down to the placement of it. I feel like this should have been, like, earlier in the album, before the album just kind of diverged into a satanic fever dream. Because, like, all the techno songs and things like that were sort of towards the beginning. I don't know why they stuck this, like, 2 or 3 songs from the end. But, as a result, I don't know, it just kind of sounds like it's lacking something. Cover Me is what we are listening to now. This is, like, basically just the definition of avant-garde. It is... That's honestly all I can really say about it. It's just avant-garde. It's really good, though, but wow, is this weird. So we are on the final track of the album. This is Headphones, and it seems to just be a continuation of Cover Me, which I assume it would sound better with headphones. Unfortunately, I don't have that ability right now, but we will listen to it with headphones at some point. But as of right now, I cannot. Anyway, it's weird as hell. So, that is the end of the post-album. Join me in 24 hours, or more like 2 seconds for you, and I will go over my final thoughts of these 2 albums, and my impression of what I got out of Björk as a whole. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and we are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, final thoughts on the 2 albums and Björk as a whole. First of all, we're going to start with Debut. It's a really good album that really means well, and probably should be a lot better than it really is, but in my opinion, it kind of drags. Now, I think if I were to listen to it again, maybe I might have a more positive opinion, but my problem is, again, it just kind of overstays its welcome a bit. The bag of tricks kind of runs out, you know, before the last maybe 3 or 4 songs. Violently Happy being that exception. But obviously there's musical direction. I mean, you would expect there to be with an artist with almost, 10, 15 years of musical experience. More so, actually. But I'm talking about, like, professional music experience. And before this album. But I can't recommend it to people as a gateway drug to Björk. Now, what I can recommend is Post. I can unequivocally recommend that album. And in fact, I think that it is just mandatory listening if you want to call yourself a music fan. There are a couple albums that I think if you really want to truly appreciate the art of music, you need to listen to. Post by Björk is one of those albums. It is an album where no matter what your musical preferences are, you need to experience this and kind of just document it as a journey. Again, I go back to that word, journey, because it is so unique in so many ways. And that is the album that really makes me want to get more into Björk's discography. And I probably will end up doing that. So, overall, I think that Björk as an artist is definitely worth my time. I think that, if nothing else, Post is worth your time. And I will definitely be getting more into her in the future. So that does it for this video. Join me next time when I try to get into 07. If you are interested in other videos like this, I have a couple already, and of course will be doing more in the future. I will have a playlist to that, as well as my co-host Tyler's series where he tries to get into prog music. He has a couple videos already, and again, we'll be doing more in the future. So, with that out of the way, bye-bye.